What's up, guys? It's your boy Tito once again, Candyman, and I'm with my wife again, Bez. And welcome to another episode of the Bez of Kenn. And so, in this episode, we're going to go back to our topic on relationships. And this time around, we're gonna focus on what it's like being married later in life.
Let's define what later means for
Yeah,
us.
in your 30s or up.
Ah,
And the reason why we're doing this is because we've noticed that, well, at least our parents and the generations before that, it's fairly common to get married in your early 20s, and then by 30s they already have three kids.
mhm.
But in our generation, we do know people who get married the same age as us in our 30s and even later, like in their 40s. Although we do know some friends who did get married in their 20s
But
and
late 20s.
late 20s,
Yeah.
or some in their early 20s. So
Oh, really?
yeah, I
Okay.
do know some friends who did get married. But I think that's what we're going to talk about now. Like, everyone has their own journey, and the reason why we're discussing this is because it's during family reunions. It's very common for titas to ask you, "Oh, when are you getting married?" Or you're getting pressure to get married in your workplace, o single ka pa rin. Ano na bang feeling? So right now we're just gonna talk about how it's okay to get married later in life, and you know and what it's like.
So, to make this a more concise conversation, because we can like talk a lot about what's the pros and cons of marrying later in life, I've decided to just break it down into four things. So,
Or
mentally, physically, financially, and spiritually. And the reason behind that is I think when you go into a marriage and into a new season, you want to make sure that you are at least holistically, sound. I would put it that way in those different aspects. And for me, those are like the four aspects of being holistic as a person or whole as a person. So let's start off with the pros, right? So mentally, one of the reasons why we decided to marry later in life was to make sure that our focus was very clear on what we wanted out of a marriage and that there would be less pressure around it. And an example of that is that we knew that when we go into this marriage that this would be for the long run, right? That we have mentally set it in our minds that no matter what happens, this is not something.
that we would take lightly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so really what I want to talk about is maturity. But I do believe that, before I go into it, I do believe that age does not define your maturity. So let me just say it that way. So for example, you could be in your early 20s, but you're really mature for your age, like you've had a lot of experiences, or you're just mentally advanced compared to your peers. So that could happen. Or we do know some people who are in their 40s, 50s who are not mature, right? Who still think that they're kids. So that's okay. But what I'm saying is you comparing yourself to your old self is definitely more mature. So for example, that person who's mature in their early 20s, chances are they're more mature in their early 30s or in their 40s, right? So it's just you comparing yourself to you. There's a higher probability that as you age, you get to have more wisdom because of your life experiences and because of the people that you meet. So what does that mean for marriage? So for example, when you do get married later in life, there's a higher probability that you're more mature. That means you've probably dealt with your traumas, that you understand what your triggers are, what makes you angry, what makes you vulnerable, or what makes you happy.
Or
Those
what
things,
makes you not vulnerable as
right?
well.
So those are the things that you probably have dealt with already, or even if you don't know how to overcome it, but at least you understand and you know how to manage it better as compared to your younger self. So that's an advantage that we do have, that when we got married in our 30s, we already understand a little bit more about ourselves. So, for example, when I do get angry, I already know what those triggers are. That it's not the person that I'm angry at. It's because of those belief systems that I have, or what triggered me, or traumatic experiences in the past. So those are the things that you learn already in your 30s.
Let's talk about physically. What's the advantage of marrying later in life when it comes to,
Physically,
yeah.
I don't know.
I actually am stuck on that one as well.
It's probably one of a disadvantage.
Mm.
Physically, you're just not as
Energetic.
as energetic, or
Yeah.
as
Okay, so let's skip that one for advantages. So the next one will be financial. So what's
financials.
the
Yes,
advantage?
I think, of course, it's a case to case, but there's a higher chance that you're more financially stable as you grow older. You're already secure with your career, so
I won't say secure, but I would say more set in
yeah,
your
more set.
career.
Yeah, because for example, if you do get married in your 20s, and you're still starting with your career,
Mm.
that might be a difficult prioritization. Do I prioritize my career, or do I prioritize my marriage? No, and when you're siguro in your 30s, you probably understand it better on how to prioritize it. Like, of course, marriage is always your priority, and then at times, but sometimes you do have to focus on
Mhm.
your career, so you just have to tell your spouse. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree. That's also what I wanted to say when it comes to financial. And ideally, when you marry later in life, you have a little bit more of a saving, so like a
Yes.
buffer
Mm.
to for the finances that will come into being married.
Mm.
And also, I think another advantage is that you can be or you might be in a two income household, right?
Right.
So that pushes up
Mm.
your financial capabilities and um, buying power.
Mm.
So that would be something good, right? And then the last one is spiritually.
Mm.
So, what do you think of that?
So I think it goes back to life experiences. So I
Mm.
think when you do get older, you'd have either a deeper understanding or a deeper relationship with God, or on the opposite extreme, you
Mm.
could say, "Oh, I don't believe in this." So at least I think,
Just like being financially you're stable,
right,
here in spiritually you can be set in your ways
right,
because you have tested out
mm,
your beliefs as well and
mm,
your values. I would like to
yes,
think of it that way. So if you marry later in life, what happens is you find somebody who has the same values as
mm,
you, somebody who believes in the same God that you do, right? And it becomes easier for that relationship.
yeah, because
Yeah,
your
but it does not mean you
convictions,
won't meet somebody like that earlier in life. But it's just that when you do it later, you're just set in your ways, and it's easier for you to find somebody who won't easily influence you,
right?
right?
Because your convictions become stronger
Mm-hmm.
as you grow older, and of course there are disadvantages of marrying
Mm-hmm.
late. We already mentioned physically.
Yeah, and I
Um,
want to touch a little bit on that because as a woman,
mm,
people think that when you marry later in life, and this is, I mean, scientifically, it is proven that, our body tends to slow down as we age, and the possibility of having children or conceiving one gets harder. And that is a reality of marrying later in life. And so that is something I considered and I really thought deeply about before saying, okay, let's do it later on in life rather than much earlier. Um, but because of great technology that we have now as
mm,
well, and personally believing that God will give me a child when it's the right time, it wasn't such a big factor in, yeah. And
right.
having that conversation with you about what are your expectations of having a family and
Mm.
what if it does not happen. So I think that's also a positive of marrying later in life.
So, like what we discussed or what we mentioned, there are advantages and disadvantages of marrying late. And of course, there is pressure from the outside world to get married right away, from your colleagues in the office, from your family members, relatives, from friends. Of course, because they think that that's not the natural progression coming from being single to getting married. But what we just want to say is that everyone has their own journey, whether you get married early, marry late, or never marry at all.
Yeah.
It's okay. Everyone has their own journey. Everyone gets to their own pace. Everyone has their own mission in life. Everyone has a purpose, whatever that might look like for you. But the most important advice for me is that it's better to not get married than marry the wrong person. So when you marry later in life, you just have more chances to understand if this person is a good fit for you. So whether what that might look like is you're a single person who's dated a lot of people, or you're someone who dated someone for a long time, like us.
Yep.
We dated a long time before we got married. So yeah, that's just a very quick podcast about marrying late.
See you in the next one.